Fort Gideon was not built on tradition. It was built on granite and pure, unyielding discipline. On the parade ground, the air tasted of dry dust and starch. The sun, already high, beat down on the 180 soldiers of the 180th Company, standing at rigid attention for the quarterly command inspection. In the center of the 3rd Platoon stood Sergeant Elara Vance, known throughout the company simply as Ghost. She was 25 years old, 5'10", and moved with a silent, economical grace that earned her the moniker. Elara was not charismatic, nor was she loud. She was simply the best. She could field strip any weapon blindfolded, navigate 100 square kilometers by the stars alone, and had scored perfect marks on every physical and marksmanship assessment since basic training. Her uniform, an extension of her own taught discipline, was impeccable, creases sharp enough to cut paper, boots gleaming with a mirror finish. But for all her perfection, Elara kept herself meticulously private. She ate alone, volunteered for solo assignments, and deflected personal inquiries with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. There was a secret she guarded with the fierce possessiveness of a desert cache, and it was the constant, low-grade hum of anxiety that never fully left her, a secret literally etched into her skin. Today, however, her anxiety was heightened by the presence of Commander Marcus Thorne. Thorne was the embodiment of Fort Gideon's unforgiving ethos. 42, decorated like a Christmas tree, and possessed of a stare that could turn water to ice, he ran the company with the iron fist of a man who believed precision saved lives and failure cost them. His reputation preceded him. He tolerated no deviations, no excuses, and absolutely no insubordination. He was a man with a hidden past, a past he had buried under layers of rank and merciless command, and he treated every infraction as a personal challenge to the order he fought to maintain. The inspection proceeded with a chilling formality. Thorne walked the lines with slow, deliberate steps, his eyes missing nothing, his hands occasionally snatching a piece of lint or adjusting an incorrectly worn insignia. Soldiers braced themselves, waiting for the inevitable hammer blow of his criticism. When he reached Elara's platoon, he stopped. Not immediately in front of her, but 3 men down. He issued a sharp, withering critique to a specialist about a faded patch, forcing the man to remove it and hold it aloft as a symbol of failure. The humiliation was palpable. Then, Thorne moved, stopping directly in front of Elara. He didn't speak immediately. He simply stared, his eyes cold, slate gray, traveling from the perfectly set brim of her patrol cap to the gleaming toe of her boot. The silence stretched, magnifying the ambient noise of the nearby highway and the rustling of the company's heavy cloth uniforms. "Sergeant Vance," Thorne finally said, his voice low, controlled, and carrying an implicit threat. "Sir," Elara replied, her voice firm and clear, projecting exactly the degree of respect required, but nothing more. Thorne didn't look at her face. He ran a single gloved finger along the collar of her tunic, stopping just where the heavy material met the skin of her neck. "Your collar, Sergeant," he stated, not as a question, but as a pronouncement. "It is stiffened with too much starch. It creates an unnatural bulge at the junction of the cravat. Regulation dictates a smooth, unforced drape. It was an insane nitpick. The collar was perfect." Elara knew it, and every soldier present knew it. Thorne was not correcting an error. He was manufacturing an incident. "Sir, the uniform was prepared exactly to regulation standards. The material stiffness is consistent with issue cloth," Elara responded, her eyes locked straight ahead. She offered no apology, only a rigid, factual defense. Thorne's jaw tightened. He saw her lack of immediate concession as a challenge. He was used to instant, contrite obedience. "Your attitude, Sergeant, suggests insubordination," Thorne growled, stepping closer until the brim of his cap almost touched hers. "The regulation is interpreted by the commanding officer, not the subordinate. The bulge is unacceptable. It implies you are attempting to conceal a deviation from the undershirt code." Elara felt the familiar cold coil of fear tighten in her chest. The undershirt. This was the razor's edge she walked every day. She wore the standard issue olive drab, but she wore it high, precisely because of the secret it covered. "Sir, I am in full compliance with all dress and hygiene regulations," she stated, her voice unchanging. "Prove it," Thorne snapped, stepping back sharply. "I am tired of this game, Sergeant. You're too good a soldier to play these trivial games. Yet, you are defying a direct order to correct a discrepancy." He turned, addressing the entire company, his voice rising to an authoritative roar that silenced the surrounding noise. "The integrity of this company is founded on absolute transparency and immediate obedience. Sergeant Vance is standing here in defiance of a direct visual inspection." He whipped back to face her, his fury absolute. He needed to crush this defiance, this single point of friction in his perfectly ordered military machine. He needed to make an example, and Ilara's cold competence made her the perfect victim. "Sergeant Vance," he commanded, his voice dripping with punitive authority. "You will remove your tunic and undershirt and display your violation to the entire 180th Company. I want every soldier here to see the consequences of challenging command. Now." The order was shocking. An immediate, audible gasp rippled through the 180 standing soldiers. Public exposure of a female soldier was an extreme legally dubious measure reserved only for the grossest, most humiliating infractions, often used to break a spirit, not correct a starch violation. It was a power move designed to obliterate her professional pride. Ilara's world narrowed to the cold gray of Thorne's eyes. Refusal was a court-martial offense. Obedience meant exposing the one thing that could not be seen, the symbol that tied her to the very catastrophe that had made Thorne the hardened, remote man he was today. She had a choice: dishonor herself professionally, or risk utter ruin by revealing her past. For Ilara, the choice was the military way: honor the chain of command, no matter the personal cost. She would not be broken. "Sir, yes sir," she ground out, her face a mask of iron discipline. The silence of the parade ground became a deafening vacuum. Ilara's hands, trained to handle explosive ordnance with perfect stillness, moved slowly, deliberately, toward the brass buttons of her tunic. Every soldier was watching. The humiliation was a thick, suffocating wave, but Ilara used her military training to compartmentalize, locking the fear in a tiny, distant room. This was not Ilara Vance. This was Sergeant Vance performing a duty. First, the tunic. She unfastened the top button, then the second, her knuckles brushing against the heavy cloth. The removal was agonizingly slow. She peeled the tunic back from her shoulders, the scent of fresh laundry and starch filling the sudden gap between her and the commander. She folded the tunic once, perfectly, and placed it on the ground beside her boot. Now, she was exposed only in her olive drab crew neck undershirt. Thorne's eyes were narrowed, anticipating the color violation. Perhaps she wore a white one, or a black one. He was looking for the visual proof of the manufactured crime. "The undershirt, Sergeant," Thorne commanded, his voice impatient, though the edge of triumph was already there. "Display the neck seam clearly. Show the company the failure of regulation." Ilara could have simply stretched the neckband, but that was not the order. The order was to remove it to display the violation. She reached up, took the neck of the undershirt, and without breaking eye contact with the space above Thorne's shoulder, she began to pull it up over her head. The material snagged briefly on her bun, then began its slow slide down. The humiliation was extreme, but Ilara focused on the movement. She pulled the shirt down past her neck, past her shoulder. The soft olive drab was replaced by the smooth, deep copper of her skin, and then the symbol was revealed. It wasn't a cheap tattoo or a casual piece of art. It was an intricate, highly specific piece of work covering her entire left upper back and shoulder blade. The design was striking: a stylized metallic key, argent, silver, in color, depicted as if frozen in a block of ice. Encircling the key were the faded ghostly outlines of 3 interlocking stars, and beneath the whole image, rendered in precise military stencil font, was a single cryptic phrase: Argent Key. The 12th of November 2012. The moment the tattoo was fully visible from the curve of her shoulder to the ridge of her scapula, Thorne's face changed. The cold, furious mask he habitually wore shattered. He didn't yell. He didn't even twitch. Commander Marcus Thorne, the iron-fisted ruler of Fort Gideon, simply froze. His eyes, which had been burning with disciplinary rage, now stared, wide and horrified, at the silver key frozen in ice. The anger drained away, leaving behind a terrifying, desolate vacancy. He looked as if he had seen a ghost from a distant, sealed-off decade. The silence that followed the removal of the shirt was absolute. No one gasped, no one moved. All 180 soldiers watched the tableau, the partially disrobed, disciplined sergeant, and the commander, paralyzed by a symbol of silver and ice. Thorne's internal world had just violently inverted. The Argent Key, that date. November 12, 2012. It wasn't just a date. It was the date of Operation Frostbite, the mission where he had lost his entire reconnaissance team, including his best friend and fiancée. The mission that had been sealed, scrubbed from the official record, and became the central, devastating failure he had spent the last 10 years trying to outrun and bury beneath layers of commendations and rank. He knew that symbol. Only 6 people had ever seen it. 6 souls who went in, only one of whom returned. The mission was known privately, tragically, as the Argent Key incident, due to a key piece of intelligence they were meant to retrieve. How did this sergeant, a woman too young to have even been in high school then, bear the mark of his deepest failure? Thorne managed to regain control only through years of sheer brutal willpower. He forced a swallow, his throat clicking audibly in the silence. His eyes tracked from the tattoo to Elara's face, searching for a family resemblance, a connection, a clue. His voice, when it finally returned, was strained, low, and utterly devoid of its previous fury. It was a command, but it sounded like a dying breath. Company ... at 10 ... shun. The soldiers snapped to attention, the sharp sound of their heels momentarily breaking the spell. Sergeant Vance, Thorne managed, his voice barely a rasp. Stand down. Redress immediately. Report to my office. Immediately. That is all. He turned on his heel, his movements suddenly jerky and uncontrolled, and marched away from the company without a dismissal, leaving 180 soldiers staring at each other in utter confusion. The disciplinary action was forgotten. The humiliation was ignored. Everything hinged on the silent silver secret etched onto the sergeant's back. Elara calmly picked up her undershirt and tunic, redressing with the same methodical discipline she had used to undress. She felt the eyes of the company on her, not with lust or pity, but with confused, silent speculation. The ghost had just revealed a history more classified and terrifying than any of them could imagine. Commander Thorne's office was a Spartan reflection of the man. Dark wood, polished metal, and a view that stretched uninterrupted to the horizon, a view he never seemed to enjoy. When Elara arrived, she found him standing by the window, his back to her, rigid as a statue carved from anxiety. She stood at rigid parade rest, her freshly buttoned tunic crisp against her skin, her hands clasped behind her back. He turned slowly. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed and distant. The commander had vanished. What remained was a haunted man. Sergeant Vance, he said, his voice quiet, almost a plea. Close the door. Then, come to attention, she complied. The door clicked shut, sealing them in a claustrophobic box with a decade of buried pain. Sir, yes, sir, Elara affirmed. Look at me, Sergeant, Thorne ordered. Elara lifted her gaze, meeting his eyes for the first time without the shield of professional indifference. The pain in his stare was raw, immediate. Where did you get that mark? He demanded, skipping any pretense of protocol. And don't lie. I want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, or you will be standing before a general court-martial before the end of the day. Sir, I received the tattoo 2 years ago, Elara answered, her military training holding firm. The symbol, Sergeant, the argent key, the date. What do they mean to you? Elara took a calculated risk. She had already exposed the symbol. Now she had to play the card. The symbol, sir, is a crest, she explained, her voice low. The 3 stars are the original members of a reconnaissance unit. The key represents the objective. The date, the 12th of November 2012, is the date the unit was officially declared Kia. Thorne swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. And how, Sergeant Vance, do you have such intimate knowledge of a mission that was classified level 7 and scrubbed from every database on the planet? Elara finally allowed a flicker of emotion, a cold, deep sorrow to cross her face. My father, sir, was one of those 3 stars. Master Sergeant Leon Vance, the only survivor of that mission, until he passed away from complications 6 years later. Thorne stumbled back a step, leaning against his desk, the heavy oak creaking under his weight. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Leon Vance, his mentor, the man who had been at his side since officer candidate school. He was the one who had brought Thorne home, sacrificing his own health. Thorne had believed Leon kept the pact of silence, never mentioning the mission again. Leon ... double quotes, Thorne whispered, the name catching in his throat. He never mentioned you. He never mentioned the key. He never mentioned the key because he promised you he wouldn't. Elara retorted, her tone sharpening, the discipline briefly cracking. He never mentioned you because it hurt too much. But he drew the key for me, sir. Every year, on the 12th of November, he would sit, silent, and trace the symbol on a piece of paper. He told me it was the symbol of an unbreakable bond and the price of a lie. Thorne closed his eyes, his large frame trembling. A lie? It was a necessary containment. Leon and we agreed to the cover-up. The intelligence was too volatile. The political fallout would have destroyed the entire command structure. He told me the truth, sir. He told me the unit was sacrificed. Elara countered, pressing her advantage. He told me that the 3 stars were deliberately left to cover your retreat, and that the argent key, the information, was worthless. He told me the command left them to him because one of them had a compromised family connection. He told me the truth about why you came back alone. Thorne straightened, the old anger flaring, but this time it was directed inward. That's not what happened. The storm was the cover, sir. Elara cut him off, her voice firm. My father was dying for 6 years because of that mission. He gave me the tattoo design before he died, sir. He told me to carry the secret and to find the man who carried the guilt. You. The room spun with the gravity of the confession. The trivial matter of a starched collar and an undershirt was now revealed to be a direct challenge to the foundations of the commander's entire career. Thorne dropped into his leather chair, the sound muffled by the thick carpet. He buried his face in his hands. I tried to tell them, Elara, he mumbled, his voice thick with tears. I went back for them. The communication lines were cut by the initial strike. I was ordered to pull out. I swore I'd never leave a man behind, but they were already gone. Leon ... He made me promise to protect the truth, to contain the disaster. That's why I'm here. I built this command on the lie that I was disciplined enough to prevent another failure. He looked up at her, his eyes begging for understanding. I saw that tattoo on your shoulder, and all I saw was the failure I tried to bury. I reacted. I saw insubordination where there was only a badge of honor. I apologize, Sergeant Vance. I apologize for the order, for the humiliation, and for the life I forced your father to live. Elara's posture didn't relax, but the tension in her jaw eased. She had achieved her objective. She had forced the commander to face the symbol he had hoped was destroyed forever. Sir, apology accepted, she said simply. But the official record shows a direct order of public exposure. And the tattoo is still a violation of the regulation against visible body art in dress uniform. The reality of their situation snapped back into focus. Thorne stood up, regaining his composure, the commander's mask slowly descending. The disciplinary action is suspended, Sergeant, he stated, his voice now flat and professional. You were ordered to display a violation, not a symbol of your family's legacy. The violation was deemed inconsequential and corrected immediately upon visual inspection. He walked back to the window. But you are correct. The tattoo is visible in summer dress, and I cannot allow it. More importantly, I cannot allow this history to surface. The argent key will remain locked. For the sake of your father's memory, and for the stability of this post, we will proceed as if this meeting never occurred. And as if that tattoo does not exist. He turned, the full weight of his rank settling back onto his shoulders. I have just 2 questions remaining, Sergeant. Why here? Why now? I joined the army to serve, sir, Elara explained. But I came to Fort Gideon because I knew you commanded this post. I needed to see the kind of man who would carry that secret. I needed to know if the discipline was a shield or a penance. And what is your verdict? Thorne asked, challenging her. The discipline is a cage, sir, Elara replied, her voice steady. And you are finally ready to break out. Thorne let out a ragged breath. He understood. They were bound. They shared a secret that was simultaneously classified, tragic, and utterly personal. She had leverage over him that no rank could overcome, and he had authority over her that was necessary to protect their shared secret. Sergeant Vance, Thorne said, a slow, calculated decision settling in his eyes. You have performed flawlessly in every field operation. Your analytical skills and psychological profile scores are off the charts. You cannot remain in a line company where any minor infraction or any change in uniform risks this level of exposure. He walked back to his desk, grabbing a thick file that bore the stamp, classified, pending transfer. Effective immediately, Sergeant Vance. You are reassigned. You will report to me directly as my executive aide-de-camp. Your duties will include the coordination of all high-level logistical planning, intelligence summaries, and personal security detail. Your rank will remain sergeant, but your access will be commensurate with a lieutenant. You will be out of uniform often, performing civilian duties. When in uniform, you will wear the heavy-duty field tunic at all times. This assignment is non-negotiable. You will report back at 6 o'clock tomorrow for your first briefing. This new assignment was a promotion disguised as a security measure. It was a way to keep her close, monitor her, and most importantly, keep her secret locked away. He was giving her freedom from her debt and her past, while simultaneously shackling her to him. Elara snapped to attention, the faint, silver key on her back, a cold promise of their new fraught alliance. Understood, Commander Thorne. I accept the assignment. Dismissed, Sergeant. Elara executed a perfect about-face and marched toward the door. Just as her hand reached the brass handle, Thorne spoke one last time, his voice a low final whisper. Elara, thank you for telling me the truth. Elara did not turn back. She opened the door, stepped out into the bright, busy corridor, and pulled the door closed on the decade of silence they had just broken. The ghost had finally been seen, and she was now firmly tethered to the commander who bore the guilt of her father's sacrifice.